I see you a little bit on Twitter, where I hang out as well. And I know one time you mentioned you're interested in this idea of narrative medicine. So I just wanted to ask, what do you think stories and medicine have in common, or why do you think they inform each other?
Yeah, yeah. At that point, I think I was still kind of flirting with the idea of getting a PhD in narrative medicine. I've given up on that, thankfully, and instead I've written a book. Uh, um, and but the idea of narrative medicine still really interests me. Uh, um, when a person goes to see some sort of medical professional, I mean, they don't go there and say, I have breast cancer, let's schedule the surgery. It doesn't work that way. It's, they tell a story about, like, there's this weird thing and it's kind of like a lump or maybe like a little pea, and is it breast cancer, and is it like my mother's breast cancer and she had died this horrible death, is it going to be like that for me? I mean, there's a whole story around that. And so this is how people connect with medical professionals is through story. And story is such an important part of who we are as human beings. And so we bring these stories to the medical professional, and of course, we expect that it is met the way a story is typically met. So with empathy or surprise or questions, or tears or laughter, but there's a certain kind of script, almost like how we're supposed to react to stories. And then often what happens in that first encounter is that the medical professional, because usually because they're pressed for time, they don't respond in that script form. I mean, they'll say, okay, okay, let's order a test. And that can be really disruptive, especially when the story is like so deep. And it can feel like, because one of the worst things that we can happen when we tell a story is that people get bored or different. And that's often kind of what I think what we take from a response like, okay, let's order a test. It's like, okay, the person doesn't want to engage with my story. They're not interested. I don't mean anything to them. And I think that's the beauty of narrative medicine, is to recognize that a story story needs to be excuse me, received in a certain way, and that also, like, the human thing again is that a story is often met with story. And so that I think it's important that the medical professional be aware of their own stories. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What a fantastic answer. I think I want to do a PhD in narrative medicine now. No, it's funny, at working as a physician, I mean, there's so many different types of doctors, but I feel like so much of my life in the hospital is listening and receiving the stories. But I also hear your point, because I think what happens is then we have to interpret the story both as a text, but in the context of everything we know about human disease and the test results. And then I think often in the next visit, then it's the medical professional telling their story back. And sometimes the two stories meet and there's agreement, but often, there's a disconnect, and, sometimes, they don't accept each other's stories. Yeah, it's really interesting. And then often we write letters to other colleagues, and again, we're telling stories. So I do feel that this idea of narrative medicine, I mean, I'm very drawn to it, obviously, because of the anthology, but I do think it's a rich vein to be tapped, and we learn so much about ourselves, as human beings, through. And I think medicine is full of stories, and they generally enlighten us about the human condition and in all its diversity.